Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Red Gaming Typicon video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to start things out with an article from the Motley Fool. Their hypothesis is that Nvidia will indeed release a graphics card which is greater in performance than the RTX 2080 Ti. I'll place a link in the video description, of course, for this particular article, but the synopsis is that the TU102 GPU, which is found inside the RTX 2080 Ti, is not tapped to its full potential. Nvidia therefore have the ability to release a GPU which has more CUDA cores enabled, along with RT cores and so on and so on. The full TU102 chip contains 4608 CUDA cores, 72 RT cores, and 576 Tensor cores, and this is combined with 288 texture mapping units and 12 32-bit memory controllers. But if you were to compare that to the 2080 Ti, you have just 4352 CUDA cores, 544 Tensor cores, 272 texture units, and 11 32-bit memory controllers. So yes, the memory bus is a little narrower, and of course the other specs as well are pared down. This isn't the first time Nvidia have done this. The GTX 1080 Ti launched with the GP102 core, but some of those shaders were disabled along with other aspects of the GPU. And then they released the Titan XP, which was a fully enabled GP102 core, although also charged a premium $700 at the time for the 1080 Ti, and the XP was around $1,200. So then, will Nvidia release a fully fledged RTX 2080 Ti version 2, or a Titan card? Well, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me in the future. I think the reason that they have not as yet is simply because of yields. There are arguments of why Nvidia are even launching the 2080 Ti right now, rather than holding back. After all, that has been their modus operandi in the past. We didn't see the 980 and the 980 Ti launch simultaneously. We didn't see the 1080 and the 1080 Ti launch simultaneously, or the 780 and the 780 Ti launch simultaneously, for example. So it's obvious that Nvidia have just wanted to get all of their GPUs on the higher end out, and then there are arguments, of course, of what we're going to see next year, which is the supposed launch date early next year of the 1060s, or sorry, the 2060s and below. In fact, a recent Steam hardware survey does show that the GTX 1060 is still the most popular card for gamers right now, and well, obviously the RTX series of GPUs has just launched, so we've not really seen the Steam hardware survey really start taking those cards into account, particularly when Nvidia have only just started to ship out the Founders Edition reference cards to customers. In fact, I've actually been speaking to a guy in the USA, and he's just told me that he received his GTX 2080 card today, the 2080 Ti card today, and he ordered several weeks ago when the GPUs were first on pre-order. So it's going to take a while for the hardware survey to catch up. So it's going to be fascinating to see exactly what Nvidia do over the next several months. Speaking of Nvidia, at least a partnership of Nvidia, and this time Nintendo. So of course the Switch has been pretty darn successful, and that's putting it mildly. But the sales of the Switch have diminished a little bit. That's not to say that they're doing poorly, far from it, but they're just not the runaway success they were several months ago. It's arguable, though, with the holiday period, a lot of folks will actually want to perhaps buy the Switch for a secondary system. It pairs rather nicely with an Xbox One X or a PlayStation 4, or even if you've got a high-end PC, particularly if you do a lot of plane traveling or just traveling in general, a Switch can be really handy. Now, it's actually rather interesting, because just a day or so ago, Nintendo put out a statement that said that they don't consider themselves necessarily a gaming company. They consider themselves more of an entertainment company. Furthermore, they don't really consider the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox systems competition. Now you may say to yourself, well, why not? Why don't they consider them competition? Instead, they consider the competition to be people's time. Because ultimately there are 24 hours in a day. Now, whether you're working or not working, if you're in school or whatever, the fact of the matter is there is only a certain amount of attention, most likely, that you can give to certain projects, particularly if you're married, if you've got children, and even if not, there's a good chance. I've got a lot of friends who are, late 20s, mid-30s, and they're doing a lot of stuff. They are either working and trying to handle courses simultaneously, plus doing lots of other bits and pieces. So ultimately, you only have a finite amount of time per day. And that's one of the reasons that it's so amazing to me that so many of you are regular viewers of this channel, because yeah, I do realize that you've only got a certain amount of time. So even if you're just listening to this as like a podcast and not actually watching the stuff on screen, it's still time that you're taking out of your day to watch this channel. And that's why it's so appreciated by us. But anyway, and Nintendo know this. So one of the things that they want to do to spur sales, at least according to a new report, is to put out a new version of the Switch. Now, this report is behind a paywall on the Wall Street Journal, but I'll give you the synopsis along with a link to their article if you happen to have a membership to their site. So, details at the moment are rather sketchy exactly what Nintendo are planning, and that's actually not because of lack of detail from the leaker themselves. Instead, it's because Nintendo don't really know what they're doing. That's not a bad way, they're just trying to figure out what they want to do for the next generation of the Switch. The leading theory right now is to improve the screen, so just a better color gamut, perhaps improve response time, thinner bezel, lower power consumption, brighter display, perhaps a higher resolution. Those are all things which are certainly on the table. But there are a lot of other things as well Nintendo could do. The most obvious is to beef up the Tegra processor inside the system. Nvidia have a lot of options that they could provide. It could either be a completely custom solution, or they could take something like the Pascal-based SoC and then put that into the device, which would give a rather nice boost in performance. Ultimately, one of the limiting factors right now of the Switch is memory bandwidth. Quite simply, it doesn't have enough bandwidth to be able to handle all of the tasks and graphics performance that necessarily it would be able to achieve if the bandwidth was just a little bit higher. So that could certainly help things. That does mean, though, that the system will still be backwards compatible. So we can presume it's going to be much like the PlayStation 4 Pro or the Xbox One X. That is, if you plonk a game in the original system or you plonk it into the new system, it will still load. It's just that the newer system, of course, will have better frame rate, nicer resolution, perhaps better shadow detail, and so on and so on. But ultimately, it's going to be interesting to see how Nintendo handles all of this and what exactly the pricing for the system is going to be. Are they going to lower the base model pricing, or are they going to replace the original Switch with like a light version of the Switch, which essentially would just be a cheaper variant because obviously they've improved the screen, perhaps better battery life. Maybe they've reduced the size of the SoC. In other words, it's in a smaller manufacturing process, so they can put out a longer battery life version of the base model Switch, and then they also release a Pro version as well of the Switch, or what is that going to look like? For those who are interested in servers and processors, there's also a couple of rather fascinating articles that are going around right now. One is from a French website. I'm probably going to butcher the name, unfortunately, lemarget.fr. I'll put a link, of course, in the video description. It is in French, but Google Translate does a pretty good job of this. And what we are seeing here is that Epyc is definitely having a profound impact in the server market, especially in cloud computing. I'm not going to read out the entire article. I do suggest you check it out, especially if you're in that type of business. But even if you're not, it does tell us that, well, a lot of the hype that has been around Epyc and AMD's Zen processors is not without reason. Too long didn't read, AMD are undercutting the price of Intel significantly, and this reduces the price that cloud computing companies need to charge to customers, which means in turn that prices go down, and well, it's just good news for everyone, especially AMD, and in turn us. Ultimately, if AMD make more money, their research and development budgets go up, which naturally filters into, well, gamers and mainstream users. But what about the actual numbers then? What type of numbers are AMD able to provide that Intel can't? The advantage of these AMD configurations is they compress more computing power per socket, 32 cores and 2 terabytes of RAM against 28 cores and 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And don't forget, the Zen 2 and the next generation of Epyc is only going to improve this. From what we understand, it's going to be 64 cores, 128 threads per socket, which is just gargantuan. According to AMD themselves, specifically Daniel Bounds, who is the head of data centers over at the company, they see the same virtual machine with 8 cores and 8 gigabytes of RAM cost an average of $247 on AMD server against $447 with an Intel setup. And it's not just the hardware which is cheaper either. The website continues to give an example. If they were to deploy a farm of 320 x86 cores, a configuration of 14 Intel Xeon 5118 12-core dual-socket servers costs $429,511 US, while 10 dual-socket AMD Epyc 7351 16-core servers would equal to just $333,614 US. And better still is the 10 mono-socket servers with Epyc, which are the 7551P 32 cores, would lower the bill to just $236,942 US. This would mean that the licensing cost for software will be reduced by about 30% and hardware up to 64%, because that's the other factor as well. It's not like when you've just bought the hardware, that's it. You need these little things. They're not that important, actually, to be honest. I don't know why I mentioned them, just like operating systems and stuff to virtualize the environment. So I guess it is kind of important. So yeah, this is obviously something that AMD are going to be using as a PR piece for quite some time. And it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how Intel respond to this. We know that Intel are planning to lower the prices for some of their processors. They've already started to do that. But ultimately, AMD have the advantage. The one saving grace for Intel, and this is something that anyone who's worked in a server environment will tell you, corporations are kind of conservative. While corporations always upgrade their hardware, at least in data centers, they also don't like to go with the necessarily untried solution. So because of this, it is going to require some time for corporations to start changing course. But the negative for Intel is that, well, now AMD have proven themselves. It's not like Epyc processors have started to explode. It's not like there's been major incompatibility issues that have not been addressed. And furthermore, with the next generation of Epycs coming out, which we can presume would improve things even further with compatibility, and we can presume is going to have considerably more compute performance given the specifications that have leaked, well, it might be just the nudge they need. And until Intel can put out Ice Lake, it might mean that Intel, at least in terms of value, maybe not mindshare, do lose out to AMD. But in a related story from Bloomberg, Intel's 10nm process is finally starting to shape up. I'll put a link in the video description, but according to this article, Intel are making, quote, significant strides towards the 10nm yields target, and according to this, we could see production begin as soon as April, which is 4 to 6 weeks earlier than what Intel had originally planned, which is obviously a major plus. So once again, this is going to be the two companies jostling for position, but with Epyc 2 supposedly going to be launched around that time frame, at least in volume quantities, well, yeah, there's certainly a lot of money to play for. With all of that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you have, well, you can click the like button and subscribe button. That would be greatly appreciated. And thanks to everyone who has subscribed and commented on the videos and emailed me recently. It's highly appreciated. I'm also going to take a moment to plug our Patreon, which is linked in the video description, along with an Amazon affiliate link. That's not to say that you have to use either. Do understand that we do appreciate the view, but if you do feel like giving $1 a month, or if you do have something you want to buy, even if it's just a toothbrush, if you buy it through the Amazon link, it does help us out. It doesn't cost you anything, but I'm just saying, if you don't want to, that's absolutely understandable. And I'd also like to take just a moment as well to thank HP for loading me an Omen X laptop, because I'm currently in the United States, so they're lending it to me so that I can, well, test it out for the next generation of laptops, which should be out by the time I get back to the UK. With all of that said, thanks very much. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.